Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our Talks with Walt, as we are calling our readings through the deathbed edition of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. We're in the Calamus section. We now turn to the last 15 poems of the Calamus section, and we're going to see this very, can we say frail? We'll certainly say short. This little 3-line offering, "Here the frailest leaves of me." And we'll want to remember that in Children of Adam in our study, you'll remember "I am he that aches with love" was a 3-line poem as well. Do you remember that in inscriptions we had still, though the one I sing is a 3-line, and then "as well to you" is another 3-line poem. So we're not out of our depths here by looking at Whitman offering a 3-line offering and yet taking it seriously. Now my assumption is that you've been with us for prior lectures at LearnStrong.net, down that left-hand side, Talks with Walt. Everything from the very beginning poems and inscriptions, which I just mentioned, all the way up to and including what we just completed with A Promise to California. Now when we look for background information from Norton's, we're told that the poem of 1860 of this Calamus number 44 actually opened with the following line, quote, "Hear my last words and the most baffling," end quote. Subsequently was dropped in 1867. The poem took its present title in 1867. Let's turn now to the poem itself. Again, just simple 3 lines. Can we say out loud and begin to pay attention to the words that get used in Leaves of Grass, but those that only get used once in Leaves of Grass? Frailest. This is the only time that word frailest gets used in all of Leaves of Grass. Of course, leaves themselves are the Calamus poems as they're being referenced, probably in this poem. "Here, the frailest leaves of me, and yet my strongest lasting. Here, I shade and hide my thoughts. I myself do not expose them, and yet they expose me more than all my other poems." Now there's been a lot of debate, of course, by biographers of Whitman about what is the secrets that Whitman continues to be gesturing towards, that he's going to tell us about, but he never actually gets around to telling us about. The great Harold Bloom, the commentator, maybe the greatest commentator of Walt Whitman, has argued that that's Whitman's promise and his lie. He's never going to really tell us what it is that's bothering him, but it's pretty clear that he has something he wants to share. Is it simply that he is gay? Is that it? Is it something that has to do with his sexuality? Is it something that has to do with his ideology? What is it? Well, we're going to gesture at it here in a poem like this. Again, notice this use of the word "here." It is a way to bring immediacy directly to the poem, and we're going to see it. We're going to see it a couple of times now here, right? "The frailest leaves of me." Again, this use of the word "leaves," we've seen it over and over again. Go back to earlier lectures, even in inscriptions, where we spent quite a bit of time talking about why it is that Whitman called his poems Leaves of Grass. "And yet my strongest lasting." Now, of course, let's outline the artistic paradox here, right? That is to say, at the same time, Whitman is going to claim that his material is weak, frail, and at the same time robust and strong. So we've got to kind of balance these. And I think Whitman is making an observation about what the great artists all are trying to do, to balance between those 2 things. Notice he'll say that these poems in Calamus are his strongest lasting. Now that's a bit ironic, because other sets of poems in Leaves of Grass have been constituted as stronger lasting. And yet I think for Whitman, the poems that we're reading here in Calamus were some of his considered greatest poems by himself. And then he'll use the second time the word "here." "Here I shade and hide my thoughts." And if you're hearing echoes from something like this, think about the way shade gets used. 5 times in Song of Myself, once he used it in Children of Adam, and 6 times in Calamus and beyond, he'll use this word "shade." And if you go back and look in Song of Myself, the way in which shade or behind the scenes is always playing around, think about the way hiding is happening, for example, in Song of Myself, passage 11, where the voyeur, the woman, is hiding handsome, right, behind the blinds, watching the young men as they are swimming, right? "Here I shade and hide my thoughts. I myself," and of course we'll think about the use of the word "myself" in Song of Myself, right? "Do not expose them." It is fascinating to think that 5 times the word "expose" gets used in Calamus. And this desire that Whitman seems to have to want to expose something about himself. And yet, to finish now the poem, they expose me, right? This idea of what it is that's being exposed. Hey, do you remember in Song of Myself passage 2 when he talks about the play of shine and shade on the trees? And then in lilacs, he'll say, oh, shades of night. Shading is part of that kind of like, is it there, is it not there? This exposure that will happen possibly in the night. They expose me more, back to this idea of strongest lasting, than all my other poems. In other words, and by the way, notice he uses the word poems here and not songs. That's fascinating that he would play that game, or leaves themselves to use it again. What is the major message of a poem like this? I think it's a longing that the artist has to be understood and accepted for what and who she or he is, and yet at the same time to somehow create a certain type of mystery, enigma surrounding that longing as well. At 2b, I love the word choice again of frailest as the only time used in all of Leaves of Grass. It's a powerful word and yet only used once. At 3a, I want to take us here now, and this might shock some of you, but to the writings of Kafka, who wanted all of his stuff destroyed at the end of his life. Thankfully, they weren't destroyed. And yet I think there's that tension that often occurs in great artists where, is this the strongest? Is this the best that I can produce? Or is it not? We obviously think of somebody like Percy Bysshe Shelley as well in a topic like that, right? Finally, at 3b, as we're beginning now to finish the last 15 of the poems of the Calamus section, what are for you, to own a poem like this, what are for you your frailest leaves? That is to say, the stuff you wish could be understood, but not exposed, right? And then finally, we'll come back to it to ask, what secret is it that Whitman is hiding, right? I mean, how do you read these poems? And what is it that he wants you to know, but not to know? Thank you.